A documentary treats a wrestler's legacy like a movie trailer, because the trailer is not actually lying.
Wrestling's scripted, it's made up, it's not real.
But it is choosing what to show, because it focuses on the most flattering angle, the strongest line, and the biggest reaction.
Ronda Rousey is here!
It highlights the moments that create doubt, like when a crowd rejects the intended hero or when a finish sparks arguments that last for years.
You never got me. This is bullshit. The referees are all in your pocket.
Moments that create doubt, like a crowd rejecting the intended hero or a finish that sparks arguments for years, usually get left on the editing room floor unless WWE has a reason to bring them back. And that approach becomes even more obvious with crossover stars because WWE needs them to feel bigger than the roster without making the roster feel secondary. Which is a difficult balance when a crossover star's appeal is built on real fighting, especially with someone like Ronda Rousey, since professional wrestling is both physical and scripted at the same time, and when that balance starts to drift, fans quickly notice and the company's highlight choices begin to look more like omissions. And Ronda Rousey makes that selective storytelling easier to see because her WWE run is basically two different stories happening at once. With the clean version being very simple, where a former UFC champion crosses over into WWE, becomes champion quickly, and helps deliver a historic WrestleMania moment, which is easy to package, easy to replay, and easy for WWE to point to when they want to say, look how big our women's division has become. While the Messier version is much harder to smooth out because crowd reactions eventually turned, match finishes became controversial, and the performer herself later spoke publicly with criticism that WWE has no reason to highlight. Yet that messy version still exists in the record, and fans clearly remember it, even if it is not the version that ends up in the forever highlight reel. And WWE's preferred Rousey narrative actually begins before she ever wrestled a single match, when at WrestleMania 31 she was introduced as a celebrity with real combat credibility and positioned as someone the audience already recognized, placed directly into a spotlight segment alongside Dwayne Johnson, where the moment played out like a surprise confrontation on the biggest stage as she stood face to face with top names, and the crowd reacted like she already belonged, making it work perfectly as an origin story because it captured the exact tone WWE wants from a crossover star, with a big moment, a big reaction, and no ambiguity. Then came the night she truly entered the timeline as an active part of WWE's women's division at the 2018 WWE Royal Rumble, where WWE presented her arrival like a flare shot into the sky as she appeared immediately after the first women's Royal Rumble match, stared down the champions and the match winner Asuka, and pointed directly at the WrestleMania sign, a visual that told fans exactly what they were supposed to feel, because this was not a celebrity showing up just to dabble but a star arriving to choose a target. And WWE also leaned heavily into symbolism as Ronda Rousey wore the jacket of Roddy Piper and embraced the rowdy identity as if it were a passing of the torch, which may not have meant the same thing to every fan, but it gave WWE a built-in story hook, because this was not simply a famous athlete appearing on the show, but a personality WWE could frame as belonging to wrestling history. And from there the company moved into the classic rookie rite of passage build, except this time it was heavyweight and glossy from the beginning, as at the 2018 WWE Elimination Chamber, the contract signing angle ended with an early physical confrontation involving Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. A moment that mattered because it served two purposes at the same time, as it positioned Rousey as someone willing to fight authority figures, while also giving WWE a simple blueprint for her debut by placing the newcomer in the ring with people who could guide the pacing, control the tone, and protect the spotlight. And her in-ring debut at WrestleMania 34 became the most replayed part of her WWE career for a simple reason, because it answered the only question that mattered, which was whether she could actually do this, as she teamed with Kurt Angle against Triple H and Stephanie McMahon in a match carefully designed to show her strengths while hiding her weaknesses, structured to feel big while still feeling controlled and safe, which is not criticism but simply the way you introduce a crossover attraction without exposing the edges of inexperience. And the crowd accepted it as the debut ended in a win, while mainstream coverage treated it like a successful transition instead of a curiosity act. And after that, WWE quickly moved her toward dominance, which is where the relationship between WWE and Rousey started to become complicated, because the same thing that made her a perfect signing also made her difficult to book over the long term, as WWE wanted her to feel like a real fighter who could also perform professional wrestling at an elite level. That is a very narrow lane, because if she looked too protected the hardcore fans would resent it, and if she looked too exposed the mainstream aura would quickly collapse. So in early 2018 WWE solved that problem by giving Ronda Rousey the kind of carefully rehearsed and carefully produced launch that almost nobody ever receives. And the approach worked at first because it fed both audiences, as casual viewers saw a star with real name value and aggression, while core fans saw a newcomer who, at least on that first major night, looked polished and fully committed. And at SummerSlam, WWE crowned her the Raw Women's Champion by putting her against Alexa Bliss and presenting the victory as a dominant breakthrough with a clear message. That this athlete was not here to climb slowly but was here to smash straight through the ceiling, and the highlight version of the story keeps rolling from there as she headlined WWE Evolution, the first all-women's event, successfully defending her title against Nikki Bella. And then her first run reached its peak at WrestleMania 35 in the first women's WrestleMania main event, where she lost a winner-take-all triple threat to Becky Lynch with Charlotte Flair also in the match, an ending that became one of WWE's most marketable images of the modern era as a new face of the company walked out with both titles on the biggest stage. And that is the clean highlight reel with the big entrance, the big debut, the fast title rise, and the historic WrestleMania ending. But that clean story required WWE to constantly balance two very different audiences because the wider audience wanted Rousey presented as an authentic combat star while the core wrestling audience wanted her to pay her dues. Like everyone else, and when that balance worked she looked like the perfect signing, but when it broke the hidden moments started to pile up, and the first moment was hiding in plain sight because it was not an accident but a deliberate choice. As Rousey's arrival at the 2018 WWE Royal Rumble happened immediately after the first Women's Royal Rumble match and WWE presented it like the cherry on top of a historic night, the big surprise reveal meant to make the entire show feel even larger, yet the criticism appeared instantly and never fully disappeared because many fans felt that the winner of the first Women's Royal Rumble had her moment overshadowed when the company finally had a landmark women's match that could have easily been the ending itself. But instead, WWE turned the camera toward the new celebrity and effectively told the audience that the next chapter was starting right now, and even years later that complaints still appeared in mainstream discussions. Nikki Bella later looked back and openly criticized the timing as disrespectful to the women who had just made history. And that is exactly the kind of quote WWE does not want sitting inside a polished documentary package because it challenges the idea that the moment was perfectly executed and instead reframes the night as a clear business decision that may have stepped on its own milestone. And from a business perspective, it is easy to understand why WWE made that choice because a surprise appearance from Ronda Rousey at the end of the 2018 WWE Royal Rumble instantly turned a successful historic match into a mainstream news moment, helping WWE dominate the conversation the next morning while positioning Rousey as an immediate top-tier star and setting the stakes for WrestleMania with one simple gesture. But the trade-off was just as clear because the first Women's Royal Rumble match was already historic on its own, and placing the Rousey reveal right after it created a permanent argument about whether WWE truly celebrated the women's milestone or simply used it as a platform to introduce the new star. And it is interesting to notice what happens years later whenever WWE revisits the 2018 Royal Rumble because the story that gets told focuses on the shocking ending and the aura of a mainstream celebrity, while the tension of having just created a historic women's moment and immediately shifting the spotlight is rarely treated as part of the legacy, which is not a scandal but simply editing. And if the first hidden moment is about timing, then the next phase becomes about something WWE cannot completely control, which is fan reaction. Because WWE's ideal scenario with a celebrity crossover is simple as they want someone who brings new viewers, earns acceptance from the core fan base, and eventually becomes a long-term attraction. And while Rousey's early in-ring work helped that goal, by late 2018 and into 2019 crowd reactions began to turn unpredictable, which is exactly the type of moment WWE rarely chooses to replay forever because unpredictable reactions break the illusion that the company is always steering the ship. And a key turning point came around WWE Survivor Series when Rousey faced Charlotte Flair in a match where WWE's story was designed to make Rousey look sympathetic as she won a major match and then suffered a brutal post-match attack that was meant to feel shocking and vicious. From a storyline standpoint, it was a classic escalation where the attacker looks dangerous, the victim looks wronged, and the rivalry instantly feels hotter, which is the kind of angle WWE has used for decades. But this time the emotional alignment became muddy because instead of the audience automatically rallying behind Ronda Rousey, some crowds reacted like the wrong person was being positioned as the hero. And in a business where the crowd is part of the product, that matters a lot, because if the audience begins cheering the homegrown star standing across from the crossover celebrity, then WWE is forced into constant course corrections as the company has to decide whether to turn the crossover star into a villain and risk losing casual viewers or keep presenting that crossover star as a hero while weekly television starts to feel like the company is fighting against its own audience. And by early 2019, the boos were no longer subtle, as on WWE Raw Rousey tried to deliver major promos while crowds loudly supported Becky Lynch during the middle of her feud with Lynch and the road to WrestleMania 35, which also involved Charlotte Flair. And in segments that were meant to elevate Rousey as the centerpiece, the crowd reaction sometimes made her feel like the obstacle instead, which is a serious problem. For WWE, because it changes the meaning of everything, since a heroic champion is supposed to feel like a reward for the audience, while an unwanted champion begins to feel like the company's decision rather than the audience's choice. And this becomes a clear example of how WWE's highlight history works, because the company can replay a successful debut forever. It can replay a clean title victory forever, and it can replay a triumphant WrestleMania moment forever. But what WWE cannot replay, without reopening the entire conversation, is the sound of a crowd rejecting the direction the company wanted, because the moment those clips are included, it acknowledges that the audience was not always on WWE's side. So instead, those chapters mostly live inside fan memory, where they are discussed in retrospectives, reaction videos, and endless debates, but they do not become the centerpiece of WWE's internal mythology. And that matters even more for a crossover star than almost anyone else. Because the entire value of a crossover attraction is that fans accept the attraction as something special, and when the crowd starts treating that attraction like a villain, even when the story insists they are the hero, the highlight reel stops looking clean. Which brings the conversation to finishes, because finishes are where WWE can protect a star while sometimes accidentally weakening them at the exact same time. And in wrestling terms, a protected finish is often a calculated business decision. Protected finish can keep multiple people looking strong, preserve a star's aura, and leave space for future rematches. But the downside is that protected finishes also invite the audience to argue about what really happened, and that becomes especially risky when the entire pitch for the performer is authenticity. Which is why with Ronda Rousey, controversial finishes slowly became a recurring part of the conversation. Not always because the matches were bad, but because the endings sometimes felt like they were trying to satisfy too many goals at once. And the biggest example is the ending of WrestleMania 35, where the highlight version of the story is very simple, as Becky Lynch pinned Rousey and walked out with both titles, which is the exact image WWE prefers because it is historic, clear, and easy to replay. But the debated version of that same moment is far messier, because some viewers argued that Rousey's shoulders were not fully down during the pin, and whether someone personally believes that argument or not, the debate itself became part of the legacy, as it turned the biggest women's match in company history into an endless internet courtroom discussion about camera angles and shoulder positioning. And that is where the hiding effect begins, because a clean myth protects a crossover star, while a disputed rules finish turns the star into the center of a debate that never really ends. And there is also a layer of backstage discussion that has stayed attached to that WrestleMania ending, as Becky Lynch later said that the planned finish changed and that a tap-out victory over Rousey was avoided. Which fits the larger story WWE was presenting at the time, with Rousey being portrayed as the star who simply does not submit. And when a brand is built on legitimacy, that kind of protection can work in two different ways, because it keeps the aura strong, but it can also make fans feel like the booking is bending around the star. And when Rousey returned for her second run, it created a different type of finish controversy that produced one of the most talked about "did she tap" moments in recent women's wrestling. At SummerSlam, Ronda Rousey challenged Liv Morgan in a match where the finish became the main story, as WWE framed it to suggest that Morgan tapped out before the referee completed the pinfall count and the official missed it, creating a built-in excuse for a rematch or continued feud. But the side effect was much bigger, because the champion's credibility became entangled in a technical argument about the referee, with Rousey able to claim she was robbed, while Morgan could insist she got the pin, and fans could replay the moment frame by frame forever, which is exactly the kind of clip WWE does not want as a permanent highlight, even if it works for short-term storytelling. And WWE also leaned into a familiar tactic with storyline discipline by presenting Rousey in kayfabe as someone who crossed lines, attacked officials, and needed to be fined or suspended. Which makes for compelling TV, because it gives the character a sense of danger and borrows the language of real sports consequences to make the scripted world feel more serious. But it also creates awkward legacy content, because the more a top star is shown as hard to control, the less their run can be sold as a smooth success story. And the same dynamic appeared in other moments WWE rarely highlights, such as in 2019 when they ran an angle showing Rousey facing consequences for unprofessional actions on Raw, while leaning on contract language and secrecy to underline the volatility of the on-screen relationship. And WWE repeated the same idea in 2022 after SummerSlam, with fines, suspensions, and authority attempts to contain a star who is supposed to feel uncontrollable, which makes it clear why these moments are not the ones WWE wants leading the highlight package, because discipline angles do not fit the clean hero story, they do not fit the sleek star factory narrative, and they carry the uncomfortable implication that the company and the character are constantly in a tug-of-war, which quietly reframed her entire status when later in 2022 on SmackDown she defended her title only to lose it almost immediately in an impromptu challenge from Charlotte Flair. Charlotte Flair returned and pinned Ronda Rousey with a quick roll-up, and on paper it is just wrestling since champions lose in surprise moments all the time, But in terms of mythology, it feels harsh because it positions Rousey as a transitional champion in someone else's comeback story. A very different feeling from the SummerSlam 2018 presentation where she was framed like an unstoppable force of nature, and while WWE can always replay moments of an unstoppable champion winning, it is far harder to replay a champion losing in a sudden return angle when the goal is to sell a legacy of dominance, which is a pattern repeated over and over, as WWE does not need to erase these moments but only choose what becomes the permanent story. And with Rousey's second run, the hiding conversation shifts from on-screen presentation to something WWE cannot repackage, which is what she said after leaving. But first it helps to understand how WWE presented the return, because the return itself was exactly the kind of moment the company loves, as after WrestleMania 35 Rousey disappeared for a long period before returning in 2022 to win the Women's Royal Rumble, and in WWE's version it served as a reset where the star was back, the path to WrestleMania was clear, and the highlight reel could start again, building her into a title match against Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania 38, where Charlotte retained with a finish that included another visual submission wrinkle in which a wrestler appeared in trouble but the referee could not fully register it in real time, the same protective style WWE repeatedly uses so no one looks weak, but the argument persists. And the following month WWE reversed the outcome at WrestleMania Backlash in an I Quit match where Rousey forced Charlotte to quit in a brutal, weapon-assisted moment, which is the version WWE prefers as it is hard-hitting, submission-based, and presents Rousey like a fighter imposing reality on a wrestling villain. And from there the title picture became volatile, as at Money in the Bank Liv Morgan cashed in to take the SmackDown Women's Championship from Rousey. Then came the SummerSlam finish controversy, and later at Extreme Rules Rousey regained the title by forcing Morgan to pass out. None of those results are obscure on their own, but when stacked together they paint a picture of Ronda Rousey's run as one defined more by sharp turns, stipulations, and debated endings than by stable, crowd-aligned momentum, and it is not the kind of story that can be neatly summarized in a single sentence, which brings us to the part WWE truly cannot repackage: Rousey's real-world criticism. And there are 4 categories that consistently come up whenever fans talk about what WWE is hiding, the first being health, specifically concussions and brain trauma. As in interviews tied to her memoir release, she spoke openly about her long concussion history and the pressure in combat sports and performance industries to stay quiet about it, describing it not as a bad week but as fear. Fear for long-term brain health and fear about what repeated hits add up to over time. The second category is specific claims tied directly to WWE storylines, as she explained in a detailed post-departure interview that an open-hand slap from Stephanie McMahon during the Elimination Chamber contract signing segment gave her a concussion, and that she experienced similar symptoms from another open-hand slap connected to her build toward the match with Nikki Bella, and those claims immediately turn what was framed as a storyline beat into a real-world health conversation. And WWE does not need the diagnosis to make the story uncomfortable, because the storyline itself is already damaging, as it suggests that what was presented as a basic plot point carried serious real-world consequences. The third category is the creative process, where Rousey described frustration with uneven planning and rehearsal resources, contrasting her experience with how WWE supported other celebrity crossover performers, including Logan Paul, explaining plainly that some performers received the full attention of the machine while others were expected to catch up on the fly, noting that the WrestleMania 35 build felt rushed from a match planning standpoint, even though the storyline build had been long. A brutally specific complaint, because WrestleMania 35 is the biggest jewel in WWE's modern women's history crown, and if one of the 3 participants claims the most important match felt thrown together, it does not fit the corporate myth. And the fourth category is direct criticism of leadership and named executives, as Rousey did not just say creative was frustrating. Ronda Rousey described the environment in WWE as miserable at times and placed blame on specific people, and even if you treat that as a single person's perspective, WWE has no incentive to put a microphone in front of a former top star telling audiences, "Here is why working here was awful," because then there is the friction between kayfabe and reality, as Rousey used phrasing in interviews that boiled pro wrestling down to fake fights for fun, which triggered backlash from fans and wrestlers who dislike top names undermining the presentation. And while WWE can live with audiences being smart about wrestling and has survived that for decades, it becomes much harder when a former champion, especially a crossover star marketed on legitimacy, says it out loud in a way that sounds dismissive, as that kind of quote does not help WWE sell tickets, does not protect the aura of the current roster, and certainly does not sell Rousey's legacy as a flawless winner. Which is where hiding becomes practical, because WWE can replay a match forever, can replay a debut forever, but cannot replay a former champion's complaints without making them feel validated by the company. And the end of Rousey's WWE story is another example where the official version looks neat, but the full picture is far messier, as the last stretch of her second run pivoted into tag team storytelling with Shayna Baszler, framed more like Rousey choosing to team with a real-life friend than dominating the singles division, signaling a shift in how WWE used her, and Rousey and Baszler won the WWE Women's Tag Team titles on Raw in a multi-team match, but at Money in the Bank the story fractured when Baszler attacked her partner, the belts changed hands in the chaos, and the partnership turned into a feud, culminating at SummerSlam in an MMA rules match where Baszler defeated Rousey by technical submission, marking Rousey's exit, and in pure WWE terms that looks like a complete ending with betrayal, a fight, and a farewell resembling the kind of write-off match WWE often uses when someone steps away, but Rousey's post-WWE chapter is why fans continue discussing what the company is hiding, because her story did not end neatly inside WWE's archive, as after leaving she signaled some form of retirement in public with her trademark jokey, defiant tone, yet still wrestled in limited ways outside WWE, immediately complicating the clean ending, including appearing under the umbrella of Ring of Honor in a tag match teaming with Marina Shafir in a heavily promoted crossover moment that felt like, you won't believe this is happening. The details matter less than the bigger picture, as WWE rarely benefits from reminding fans that a recent former champion is wrestling elsewhere, especially if that former champion is publicly critical of WWE's leadership and creative process. So the reason certain Rousey moments feel hidden is not because WWE can erase them, but because replaying them gains the company nothing. And responsibly speaking, WWE is curating a legacy where the curated version emphasizes the parts that make the company look like a star factory. The WrestleMania debut that exceeded expectations, the fast title rise that made headlines, the historic WrestleMania main event that changed perceptions of what women could do on the biggest stage, and the shocking Royal Rumble return that instantly reset her as a top-tier star, while de-emphasizing the parts that complicate the story, including criticism that her Royal Rumble 2018 arrival upstaged other women's history, stretches where crowds loudly rejected her on weekly television because that undermines the notion that the company's vision always aligns with audiences, and controversial finishes that take attention away from clean outcomes because they invite endless debate rather than celebration. WWE also de-emphasizes storyline discipline angles that make Ronda Rousey appear hard to control because that does not fit a smooth success story, and it downplays her post-run criticism of WWE's inner workings because promoting that would be the company validating her claims. So in practical terms, the hidden moments fans keep returning to are the ones that threaten one of WWE's two preferred ways to sell Rousey. If WWE wants to present her as a legitimate fighter, rules argument finishes and dismissive quotes about fake fights are problematic. And if WWE wants to present her as a well-run entertainment machine success story, repeated authority punishments, inconsistent crowd reactions, and a memoir tour criticizing leadership are problematic. None of which requires a conspiracy but only editorial choices. And if you want one sentence that holds up when stripped of drama, it is this: Ronda Rousey's WWE story is both a kayfabe career and a real-world collision between a legitimate fighter's identity and a performance industry that survives on clean narratives.